Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. This is the Furibee Toad90. Featuring an F3 flight controller with an OSD, 10 amp 4-in-1 ESC, Happy Model branded 1104, 7500 kV motors, 50mm 5-bladed props, 600 TV line CMOS camera with a 48-channel VTX. It's 25 milliwatt. We've got a buzzer, JST for your battery connection. It weighs 70 grams. Bottom plate measures 2.77 millimeters. Top plate measures 1.59 millimeters. Camera mounting plates measure 1.6 millimeters. Looks like it's just under 90 millimeters. It comes with binding instructions, prop guards, an extra set of props, tiny little screwdriver and hex driver, 2 rubber bands, Velcro for your battery, and a baggie of screws. This was a pretty pleasant flight experience. You know, it's not a burner, it's running 2S. It's not exactly the lightest model around. You know, we've got some metal bits here and we've got some pretty thick carbon fiber. but it's running Betaflight 3.2. I think it's a release candidate. I think this was flashed before Betaflight 3.2 was final, and 3.2.1 of course for sure. But I'm flying on the default PIDs, no PID changes. I just flew on the defaults. Could it use some changes? Sure. But you know, I thought it flew really, really well on 3.2. And one thing I'll add, I have seen or been referenced a few videos where it seems like the trend on YouTube is to put 3.2 on something and then just say it's locked in. And that's just not my experience. And I have to question if people who are making YouTube videos are saying 3.2 just locks it in. Because I've seen a few of those videos and it looks like the pilot's having a hard time keeping it in the air. So 3.2 is really, really good, but it's not the end-all, be-all to fixing any sort of flight problems. One, you need to be able to fly a bit, and you need to be able to tune a bit. In this case, I don't think it needs that much. I think we could pump up the D a little bit to stop the bounces and maybe reduce a little bit of that prop wash on hard 180 turns when we're carrying speed into the turn. We might be able to pump up the P a little bit, and probably a little bit more P on yaw as well, but I thought the I was fine. Of course, you can turn on different filtering and tweak some of the notch filters and really tune it to your liking if that's your experience. But right out of the box, one of the things that's nice about 3.2 and the default PIDs is that somebody can get this who doesn't necessarily want to PID tune or has experience with PID tune, or it doesn't fly in a group of someone else. They can tap into that knowledge and it'll fly pretty reasonably, just as you've seen in the video. It'll fly just like that. But getting back to its performance, it tracks really well, and part of that is these props. 5-bladed props kind of fly almost like you're driving. You have to compensate a little bit less with throttle when you're going into banking turns. The only way I can describe it is that it just feels like it tracks better. Of course, these props are very inefficient, so if you want longer flight times, you should go to something that's not bull-nosed and not 5-leafed. The more blades you drop, the more efficient it will likely become. So they tout 6 to 8 minutes on the website. Yeah, and well, you might be able to get that in a hover using a giant 2S battery, but I was using a 500 milliamp 2S battery, and I think I got a little over 3 minutes, but that's pretty reasonable. I can handle that. You do have camera tilt. It's going to be really hard to see this. There's right in there, there's an angle that you can move this screw back and forth, and this is the pivot point down here, so you can angle the camera back, but I've got it about as far back as I can get it without doing some modifications to the antenna. One of the things we can do is we could put 2 bends in it, bend it one forward and then one back up, and hopefully there's enough length in that coax to where we can still have our circular polarized part still sticking above, and then we could tilt it back a wee bit more. The alternative to that is going to be to mount a different antenna altogether. Maybe go with a linear whip antenna and bring it down through one of these slots to solder it to the camera. Of course, that's quite a bit of work, and that's really up to you if that's something you need or desire. As for these prop guards, can you fly it inside? Sure, you can fly it inside. You know, this isn't exactly a light model, isn't exactly a slow model, so 1104, 7500 kV, even on 2S is going to carry quite a bit of speed. When you're thinking about using these prop guards, I think it's going to be very likely you're going to be flying in large indoor spaces, gyms, armories, warehouses, things of this nature. I don't think you could put these prop guards on and fly in your house very reasonably. I didn't even attempt it, and our house is fairly large. I fly inside quite a bit. But they do include them, and they're fairly stiff and rigid. I don't know how well the impact. I've seen these time and time again, and they make them in a way that it should hold up because, you know, we have more depth here than we do width, and that's kind of where you want the strength. But it all depends upon this material and how durable it is. But, you know, if you have an inside fly over the winter somewhere, you might be able to put these prop guards on and fly it inside some large indoor spaces and have some fun too. One thing that I don't like anymore, I've kind of gotten away from it, is oftentimes we have these little voids. And what I find when I crash, especially when I crash in the yard, is I come down and I hit into the dirt or the mud, and all that void does is allows dirt to get right up in our bell, or mud, depending upon the weather. And so I would prefer that if we're going to have this just be solid, no holes, or we just cut it off a little bit, you know, just make it perfectly round. I really don't like these things because it's almost like a funnel to getting mud or dirt inside the bell of your motor, and then you've got to clean it out or wash it out depending upon the method you want to take. But overall, you know, I really can't complain much. The antenna, that might bother some of you, but really, I didn't have any troubles with it. Oh, and I wanted to bring up one other thing. So they use the JST, and one of the things I noticed when they use the JST, hopefully you can see that in the connector, that's not a loose connection there. That is, they're using a larger gauge wire and they are stuffing it in there. This reminds me exactly what I used to do when I was making brush models. Is I would use probably a 16 gauge wire, although I think I looked once and didn't see it. We have the heat rating there. Oh, here we go. I think that says 18 gauge right there. So they've got a nice thick fat wire that they've shoved inside that JST, and that will help. Although, you know, after a number of connections, you may find that you want to change this JST out to an XT30, which has a longer life. But again, you should be able to get plenty of use out of this. I'm not talking limited, you know, 15 to 20. I'm talking hundreds of times before you might want to change this out. But I really wouldn't change too much. You know, I think they did a nice job. I think it flies well. I really like the fact that on the Betaflight 3.2 defaults, it flies just fine. And I didn't spend a lot of time tuning, although we have the OSD that will allow us to tune just fine as well. It's nice to review a model that flies well. After the last few, I've been really disappointed, but I'm pleased that we could get this one here and that it flies reasonably well. It's a good 2S flyer. I think that a lot of people would have good fun. The price point, I think the last time I checked, was a little over $100, which is, again, it's north of the Leader 120, and the Leader 120, I know all of you have heard it many, many times, is my favorite micro to date. I think if you're looking at this one, you need to look at the Leader 120 and see what the price point is for that one as well. I'll link the Leader 120 down below. The Leader 120 has been on sale off and on, around $90 or below $90. This one is going for about $103, $104, so you may be able to save yourself enough money to buy some batteries if you go with the Leader. And I can't see any reason why you would choose this one over the Leader 120. So, you know, I think if you're looking at this one, you won't be unhappy with it. If you're looking at this one, you should also look at the Leader 120. And I'll leave a card to my Leader 120 video right up here. Full review that's been very, very popular. Unfortunately, because of the popularity, it has been difficult to get at times. Shipping has been delayed, I think, for a lot of different people. That's unfortunate and sad, but I know Lewis over at Full Speed is making them as fast as they can, and he oftentimes posts pictures to Facebook about boxes of Leader 120s going out, so they're making them fast. But the Toad90 here is a unit you won't be disappointed in if you're looking at it. It flies well. I can't complain too much. I like the fact that they put 3.2 on there, and they include everything you need to get it up and running. You know, you've got some simple binding instructions, and it just flies fine. Nothing special to write home about. It's not a burner. It's not really slow. It's kind of fits in with all the well-flying micros that we've been seeing, except for the SPC Maker products. Okay, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please leave those in the section down below. I'll put links to this vehicle as well as the Leader 120 that I spoke of down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.